Okay, hello to all of you. Let's discuss now about proteins, which is the part 2 of chapter 5. So, in part 1, we have already discussed nucleic acids. So, let me go into the slideshow mode. Okay, so let's talk about proteins. So, as I told you in the last lecture, that proteins are very versatile and they are the real players in the cells, and proteins are the ones which do majority of the functions in the cell. And I'm going to go over some of the important functions which are performed by the proteins. The very important function of proteins is that they can act as enzymes, and we will talk about more about enzymes, what enzymes are, what do the enzymes do, how they catalyze the reactions. So we have one complete chapter on enzymes. So majority of the enzymes, they are protein in nature. So this is one of the very important property of proteins, that they can act as enzymes. Then proteins, proteins can act as defensive proteins, like when we get some infection, then we are protected by the antibodies. These antibodies are nothing but glycoproteins. So they are proteins with some sugar chains attached to them. So proteins, they can be defensive proteins. Then proteins can be storage proteins. Like for example, like milk. Milk has a very important protein in it. It's called casein. Like egg. So why do we eat egg? Because it's a very rich source of proteins. So in the eggs, there is a protein called albumin. So egg is a very rich source of proteins. Then proteins, they are transport proteins. Like hemoglobin is a protein which is there in our red blood cells, and it is responsible for carrying the oxygen throughout our body. So that's a transport protein. So hemoglobin, an iron containing protein of vertebrate blood, transports oxygen from lungs to other parts of the body. And also there are some proteins in our plasma membrane. We will talk about in detail about the structure of plasma membrane. In the plasma membrane are embedded some proteins, and those proteins can act as transport proteins. So they can help in the movement of solutes and some ions from inside to outside, or outside to inside of the cell. So proteins are enzymatic proteins, defensive proteins, storage proteins, transport proteins, and also some of the hormones, they are also protein in nature, like insulin. Insulin is a hormone which is secreted by the pancreatic cells, and insulin basically regulates the blood sugar level. So it's a protein in nature. Then receptors, there are some proteins which act as receptors. There are some proteins embedded in the membrane. They act as receptors, and they receive the signals from the outside. From outside, they receive signals from outside, and then they pass the message to the cell. And some of the proteins, they are like motor proteins, or they are contractile proteins, like cilia and flagellum. They basically which help in the movement of the cells. Cilia and flagellum, they are like short appendages. Flagellum is a long appendage, and they can help in the movement of cells, or they can help in some movements. They are also made of proteins. Then actin and myosin, these muscle cells which help in the contraction. These muscle cells, we have muscles, and they are basically made of two very important proteins called actin and myosin. And these two proteins, actin and myosin, they are responsible for the contraction of muscles, and because of the contraction of muscles, we can move around, we can do various things. Then structure proteins, there are some proteins like keratin. That's a protein of hair, horns, feathers, and the skin appendages. So they are basically structure proteins. Collagen, elastin, they are basically present in the connective tissue. So these are all examples of structure proteins. So the overall story is, these proteins, they do many functions in our cells. Okay, and these proteins, they are coded by DNA. Okay, so nature chose DNA to code for proteins. Okay, and how does this happens? This process is called gene expression. The DNA is first converted into RNA, and then RNA is converted into protein. So this is called central dogma. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the structure of proteins. Okay, so proteins, they are polymers, and they are made of monomers, and the monomer of proteins is amino acids. Okay, so there are around 20 amino acids which make the proteins, and we are going to talk about the structure of protein, and the structure of protein can be discussed at 4 different levels, and then you will come to know what a polypeptide means and what a protein means. So there's a difference between polypeptide and a protein. So let me tell you some definitions here, and then as we will move forward in this lecture, you will understand what's the difference of a polypeptide chain and a protein. So polypeptide chain are unbranched polymers built from these amino acids. So the amino acids, the amino acids link with each other through peptide bonds, and they're called polypeptide chains. But these polypeptide chains, as I'm going to show you very shortly, they actually fold, and I have posted one very good video. Please watch that video. It will really help you understand, it will really help you in understanding the structure of protein at 4 different levels. So polypeptides are unbranched polymers built from these amino acids, and protein is a biologically functional molecule that consists of one or more polypeptides. So you will as you move forward, you will really understand what's the difference of a polypeptide chain and what's the difference between polypeptide chain and a protein. Okay, let's talk about amino acids. So amino acid is a monomer of protein, and let's talk about this. So it's a subunit or a monomer of protein, and amino acid has 2 functional groups. One functional group amino acid is a amino group, and second functional group is a carboxyl group. So because of the presence of the carboxyl group, these amino acids are called, they got the word acid. So amino acids, they have 2 very important functional group. One is the amino group, and second is the carboxyl group. Okay, because of the presence of the carboxyl group, amino acids got the word acid. So you will see that wherever this carboxyl group is there, this acid word is there. So you will see this thing in fatty acids also. We'll be talking in lipids. So fatty acids, the long chain of carbons and hydrogens, and at the end they have a carboxyl group. That's why they are called fatty acids. So amino acids, why they are called amino acids? From where does this acid word came? From the carboxyl group. Amino is because they have the amino group. So let me show you the structure of a amino acid. So there are 20 different amino acids. Okay, there are 20 different amino acids. Every amino acid has this amino group and a carboxyl group, and it has one hydrogen here. And what makes all these 20 amino acids different from each other is the presence of the R group. So in 20 different amino acids, they have different R group in them. Okay, so they have different R group in them. So this is a table. This is a table which shows 20 different amino acids. Okay, so you can see here all these 20 amino acids, they have a carboxyl group, they have a amino group, and they have a hydrogen. And the 4th group which is there is the R group, and this R group is different in all 20 different amino acids, and that's this. The presence of this different R group makes every amino acid different from the other amino acid. So this is glycine. Okay, so basically in this table there are 20 amino acids, and these amino acids, they can be divided into 4 different categories. The first category, you can see all the highlighted parts. This is all R groups. They're shown in yellow color. So this is first group, first category. This is second category, in which all the R groups, they are highlighted in green color. Then these are amino acids with the R groups are in pink, and these are in blue. So basically, the first group, in the first group, all the R groups, they are hydrophobic. All the R groups, they are hydrophobic. Okay, so these are all hydrophobic amino acids. Okay, so you can see here, this is glycine, the R group is H. This is alanine, the R group is CH3. This is valine, the R group is CH3, CH, CH3. So the R group is hydrophobic or non-polar. So how to know whether the group is polar or non-polar? If you remember from chapter number 3, we discussed water is a polar molecule. Why water is a polar molecule? Because water has oxygen in it. Water has oxygen in it, and oxygen is very electronegative. Oxygen is very electronegative. And because of the presence of the electronegative oxygen, it has the tendency to pull the electrons towards itself, right? So that is why oxygen is electronegative. So to figure out if a group is polar or non-polar, if you see the presence of electronegative atom like oxygen or nitrogen, then you can figure out that this group is polar in nature. So if you look at these groups here, in these groups, you will see that all the groups which are highlighted in yellow color, they have either C or they have H. Okay, so these are, or if there is some nitrogen, it's structured in a way that these groups are all non-polar in nature. So these are hydrophobic amino acids, and these amino acids, example is serine. You can see there's oxygen here, threonine, oxygen here. So these are polar groups. Okay, so that is why these amino acids, they are polar, or they are hydrophilic. Okay. Then cysteine, tyrosine, asparagine, and glutamine. And then the third category of amino acids is the charged amino acids. The charged amino acids. So the charged amino acids, the first category is negatively charged amino acids because they have acidic group in them, COOH group here. Okay, so aspartic acid and glutamic acid, they have COOH group, they have a carboxyl group in them. So aspartic acid and glutamic acid, they have carboxyl group in them. So that is why they are negatively charged amino acids. And then the fourth category is also of charged amino acids, but these are positively charged. So these are lysine, arginine, histidine. So lysine, arginine, and histidine, these are all positively charged amino acids. So basically what you need to know from this table is that there are 4 groups of amino acids. The first group is hydrophobic amino acids. Second group is hydrophilic or polar amino acids. And then we have a category of negatively charged amino acids, and the fourth is positively charged amino acids. So this is, these are all non-polar amino acids or hydrophobic amino acids. Then this is hydrophilic, this is negatively charged, positively charged. So you need to know these 4 categories, and you also need to know why an amino acid is polar or hydrophobic, why an amino acid is non-polar or hydrophobic, polar or hydrophilic, why they are negatively charged or positively charged, because you can get these kind of questions. Now, how these amino acids, so we talked about the structure of amino acid, that every amino acid has an amino group, it has a carboxyl group. So now the question is, as we know that the proteins, they are macromolecules, they are polymers, and they are made of monomer called amino acid, and we just talked about the structure of amino acid. Now the next question is how these amino acids are connected to each other. So these amino acids, they're connected to each other by peptide bonds, peptide bonds are covalent bonds. And how these covalent or the peptide bonds are formed, they are again formed by the dehydration reaction. So we have already discussed what dehydration reactions are. Dehydration reactions are those reactions in which there is a loss of water molecules. So you can see here, these are two amino acids. This is the third amino acid. So you can see this amino acid is losing OH, this amino acid is losing H. So together they lose a molecule of water, and that results in the formation of a peptide bond between these two amino acids. Okay, so this is amino acid, this is another amino acid. So they together lose a molecule of water, and that results in the formation of a peptide bond between these two amino acids. So this is the way how these amino acids, they are linked to each other. Okay. So this is different ways how the proteins, these are different structure models of proteins. So in different books you can see space filling model or a ribbon model or a wireframe model. So these proteins, they can be shown this way. Now we are moving towards understanding the structure of protein at 4 different levels, and something very important to know here again is that structure of a protein is very important because that determines the function of the protein. So this is just showing an antibody, and the antibodies, I hope you guys understand what antibodies are. They are defensive proteins. So they basically, when we are infected with some bug, with some virus or with some bacteria, then our body makes, our defense mechanism makes antibodies, and these antibodies, they go and bind to the proteins on the viruses. So the structure of the antibody is such that they can go and bind to the proteins of the viruses or the bacteria. So the structure of the protein determines the function of the protein. So you will understand that now we're going to talk about the structure of protein at 4 different levels, and you will understand that once the structure is lost, the protein loses its function. Okay, and now as we talk about the structure of protein at 4 different levels, which is a primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and the quaternary structure. Okay, now after you understand the structure of protein at 4 different levels, you will understand that the structure of protein, why it's so important for its function. Because if the protein loses its structure, it loses its function. So how the protein is folded, that determines its structure, and the structure determines the function. So if the protein loses its structure, it loses its function. Okay, so first of all is the primary structure of the protein. Now what's the primary structure of the protein? Primary structure of the protein means basically the order of amino acids. As we know that the subunit of proteins is amino acids, and there are 20 different amino acids, and these amino acids, they're linked to each other by peptide bonds. So the order of amino acids, which amino acid is number 1, which amino acid number 2, which is 3, which is 4, that is the primary structure. Okay, let me explain you here. So this is you can see these are the different amino acids. Okay, so this is glycine, proline, threonine, glycine, threonine. So this is the order of the amino acids. Okay, so this is the primary structure of this protein. What is the order of amino acids? That's the primary structure of the protein. Now, so this is the primary structure. Now what is secondary structure? Now secondary structure is basically the chain. So this is the primary structure of the protein. Okay, this is the primary structure of the protein, and this is called the polypeptide chain. Okay, now if we go back, let me explain you from here. If we go here, okay, so you can see here, this is a peptide bond, right? So we talked about these are 3 different amino acids and how they're connected to each other by peptide bond. This blue bond which is shown here is a peptide bond. So as we know the structure of amino acid, we know that every amino acid has a carboxyl group, every amino acid has an amino group. So the carboxyl group of this amino acid is going to lose OH, and the amino group of this amino acid is going to lose H. So together they lose a molecule of water, and that results in the formation of a peptide bond. Okay, so this is what is the primary structure. This is the order of amino acids. But important thing to see here is this is a peptide bond here. At every peptide bond, whether this peptide bond or this peptide bond, at every peptide bond which is formed between carbon and nitrogen, you can see that to this carbon is double bonded to this carbon. You can see that this carbon is making two bonds with oxygen. If you look at this nitrogen, this nitrogen is making single bond with hydrogen. Okay, so you can see here that this is a peptide bond, this is a peptide bond, and at every peptide bond there is an oxygen and there is a hydrogen. So oxygen, if you remember, you can see this peptide bond also. Look at this peptide bond. There is a carbon which is double bonded with oxygen. This is nitrogen which is bonded with hydrogen. So at every peptide bond there is oxygen and there is hydrogen. So if you remember, oxygen is electronegative, so which means it has slight negative charge. Remember from water, okay? So oxygen can pull the electron towards itself, so it has slight negative charge, and this is hydrogen, it has slight positive charge. So which means that at every peptide bond there is a oxygen which has slight negative charge, and this is hydrogen which has slight positive charge. So which means that if we look here, coming back here, sorry. Okay. So we were talking about the primary structure, which is the order of the amino acids. So this is the primary structure. This is the primary structure. This is the order of the amino acids. These are different amino acids. And these amino acids, they are linked to each other by peptide bond. Okay. So these two amino acids, they're linked by peptide bond. These two amino acids are linked by peptide bond. All these amino acids, they're linked to each other by peptide bond. And at every peptide bond, so this is a peptide bond. At every peptide bond, there is oxygen, there is a hydrogen. Oxygen has slight negative charge, hydrogen has slight positive charge. So because at every peptide backbone, there is a slight negative charge, slightly negatively charged oxygen and slightly positive charged hydrogen, do you think there can be attraction between these? So do you think this oxygen here can pull, so do you think this is an oxygen here? Can it attract, because this is positively charged, can it attract hydrogen, this hydrogen or this hydrogen? This hydrogen? Yes, it can. Okay, so because at every peptide bond there is oxygen and hydrogen, so there's a possibility of attraction between these slightly oppositely charged atoms. And as a result of that, what happens? As a result of that, this polypeptide chain, it folds. And when these oxygen and hydrogen, they're attracted towards each other because of the partial charges on them, this attraction is hydrogen bonds. Okay, so as a result of the attraction between slightly charged oxygen and hydrogens, that results in the hydrogen bonding. Because of that, this chain can fold. It can either acquire this shape, and this is called alpha helix, or the chain can acquire this shape, which are called beta strands. Okay, watch that video, you will be able to understand in a better way. And another very important thing to know about these amino acids is, yes, they do have at every peptide bond, they do have at every peptide bond, they have oxygen and hydrogen, but don't forget every amino acid, but don't forget every amino acid also has a R group. Every amino acid has a R group. And these R groups, they can also interact with other R groups in different ways. And these R groups, they can interact in various ways by different kinds of bondings, which can be ionic bonding, hydrogen bonding, van der Waals bonding, or disulfide linkages. And that results in the further more folding of the chain. So this is the secondary structure. The secondary structure is because of the hydrogen bonding, which is because of the oxygens and hydrogens at the peptide backbone. But because every amino acid also has an R group, the chain which is folded like this, it folds more, and then the polypeptide chain attains a tertiary structure. Okay, so when the chain folds more, and that folding is because of the presence of the R groups, the chain attains tertiary structure. Now depending so if the different kinds of proteins, some proteins are made of only one polypeptide chain, some proteins are made of more than one polypeptide chain. So depending on if a protein is made of only one polypeptide chain, if a protein is made of only one polypeptide chain, then how the chain folds, secondary structure and then tertiary structure, that is the final three-dimensional structure of that protein. But there are some proteins which are made of more than one polypeptide chain. So now if a protein is made of two polypeptide chains, so a polypeptide chain, suppose there are two polypeptide chains, so each polypeptide chain will have a primary structure, it will have a secondary structure, and then it has a tertiary structure. So those two fully folded chains who have acquired tertiary structure, how they further interact with each other, and how they interact, they are again going to interact because of various kinds of bondings, ionic bonds, hydrophobic interactions, van der Waals interactions, then disulfide linkages. So how the two chains interact with each other, that results in the final three-dimensional structure of that protein, which is made of two polypeptide chains, and that structure is called a quaternary structure. If a protein is made of only one polypeptide chain, then that protein has only tertiary structure. If a protein is made of more than one polypeptide chain, then that protein has a quaternary structure. So this is the structure of protein at 4 different levels. So you can see here, this is the primary structure, which is the order of amino acids. This is the secondary structure. The secondary structure is because of the hydrogen bonding, and it is because of the hydrogen bonding between oxygens and hydrogens at the peptide bond, and because of the hydrogen bond, this polypeptide chain attains a spiral shape like this, or it attains the shape like we can call it like these are kind of like the sheets. Okay, so that's why it's a shape of like sheets. So this is like a helical shape. These are called alpha helix, or it can be called a shape of a coil. Okay, so when the chain folds like this, it takes the shape like a coil. It's called alpha helix. Or if the chains attain like shape of these sheet, like parallel sheets kind of a thing, then these are called beta plated sheets. This is tertiary structure when the chain folds more. This is quaternary structure. It's when the fully folded polypeptide chains, they further interact with each other. And this basically shows the different kinds of bondings which can be responsible for the tertiary structure as well as the quaternary structure. I've already discussed hydrogen bonds, disulfide linkages, hydrophobic interactions, and ionic bonds. So secondary structure is only because of hydrogen bonds. So this is a protein called collagen. It is made of 3 polypeptide chains. Hemoglobin, very important protein. It has 4 polypeptide chains. It has 2 alpha and 2 beta subunits. So hemoglobin is a protein. Hemoglobin is a protein which is made of 4 polypeptide chains. 2 alpha and 2 beta. And how a protein finally folds and what kind of a shape a protein takes, it actually depends on the primary structure of the protein. And primary structure is the order of the amino acids. So what kind of amino acids are there in a protein and how they are ordered, that determines the final three-dimensional structure of the protein. So this is all what I explained. I'm going to skip this. Okay, something very important to know here about the how a change in primary structure can actually change the function of the protein. So I hope you guys know a disease called sickle cell anemia. So in this disease, in the sickle cell anemia, basically, these patients, they have red blood cells in them, which are like, the shape is not a spherical shape like a normal RBCs. They have a shape which is like a sickle shape, and because of that their oxygen carrying capacity is less. And why is that? It's because a change, it's because of a change in the protein, in the protein hemoglobin. So there is a, actually in the sickle cell anemia, which is a disease, these patients, they have a point mutation, okay, and because of a point mutation, there's a change of point mutations. I hope you guys understand what mutations. It's a sudden change in DNA, and there is a change in one nucleotide, and because of which there's a change of one amino acid, and as a result of that there's a change in this protein. So let me show you here. So this is like normal people. This is in the sickle cell anemia patients. So this is the primary structure of beta subunit of the hemoglobin. So as you know, hemoglobin has 4 polypeptides, 2 alpha and 2 beta. So this is the primary structure of the beta subunit in the normal people, and this is in the sickle cell anemia. So the main difference between the primary structure of the protein here is the 6th amino acid is glutamic acid, which is a negatively charged amino acid. So in the sickle cell anemia patients, they have a point mutation. So it's a mutation which is a point mutation, which means there is a change in there's a change in one nitrogenous base, and because of that what happens is there's a change of one complete amino acid. So instead of glutamic acid, these patients, they have valine in them, okay. So in the normal people, they have amino acid called glutamic acid, but in these patients, instead of glutamic acid, they have valine, and valine is a non-polar amino acid. So this is a, just because of one change of one nitrogenous base in DNA makes a difference of amino acid from glutamic acid to valine. This is the negatively charged amino acid, this is a non-polar amino acid. So as a result of that, what happens? As a result of that, you can see this is a normal beta subunit. This is the shape, okay? And hemoglobin has 4 subunits, 2 alpha and 2 beta, and its normal hemoglobin's structure is like that. And when the normal hemoglobin has structure like that, then these proteins, this hemoglobin, do not associate with one another, and each carries oxygen. So this is the way, this is one hemoglobin molecule, this is another hemoglobin. So you can see all are separate, and they basically can carry the oxygen. But what happens in sickle cell anemia patients, that there is a change of amino acid. There is a change of amino acid from glutamic acid to valine, and as a result of that, you can see the shape of the beta subunit. And as a result of the changed beta subunit, you can see the hemoglobin protein is like this, and these, because of the changed beta subunit, these proteins, they aggregate, okay. So here in normal people, you can see how they all separate and they can do the function. But here these proteins, they all aggregate, okay, and they form like this, and because of that these red blood cells are sickle shaped and their oxygen carrying capacity is reduced. Okay, so this is an example that how a change is a very, very good example to emphasize that how a change in primary structure can make a change in the function of that protein. So this is hemoglobin. You can see how a change in the primary structure of the beta subunit of hemoglobin is causing the these proteins to aggregate, and the oxygen carrying capacity of this protein decreases, and as a result of that these patients, they suffer from the disease called sickle cell anemia. So you can see how the change in primary structure causes the change in the structure, causes the change in the function, sorry. Okay, now we know that we just studied the structure of protein at 4 different levels. So for a protein to function, its structure is very important. Okay, so if the conditions of the protein are changed, okay, the protein can lose its structure. And if the protein loses its structure, if a protein loses its structure, it loses its function. So these are some of the conditions which can cause alteration in the structure of the protein. Like if you change the pH, if you change the temperature, or if you change the salt concentration, as a result of that the protein is going to lose its structure. And if the protein loses its structure, the protein becomes denatured. Okay, we call it the protein got denatured, and denatured proteins are biologically inactive. So you can see that this is a protein. This is a protein with protein with normal. This is a normal protein. You can see how it has a conformation, how it has a shape. But if the conditions change, then the protein gets denatured. And when it gets denatured, you can see how it is losing its shape. And when the protein loses its shape, the protein is denatured. And also these proteins, as you saw that how the protein gets folded, every protein gets folded, and sometimes these proteins they get misfolded, and that results in a disease state like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. So these are the diseases in which the proteins, they are misfolded. And there are various ways to know the structure of the protein: X-ray crystallography or NMR spectroscopy or bioinformatics approaches there these days to know the structure of the protein. Okay, this is basically showing X-ray crystallography technique by which we can figure out the structure of the proteins. Okay, so this is all about the proteins. So in the third part, I'm going to talk about lipids and the